All right, what's going on, everybody? Good morning. Got a huge night of boxing coming up tonight with the pay per view with the Charlo brothers, and we have the card on the zone with Breedis and Dorticos. So that's going to be another good card, in my opinion. So I'm actually excited today. Looking forward to all these great fights. But again, one story that seems to be dominating the headlines here is this issue with Canelo Alvarez with the zone and his promoter, Golden Boy Promotions. Now, it's been reported by The Athletic, and a lot of other websites are just referencing their article and making stories about it. So, technically, there's only one source to back up this story. Um, I'm a little skeptical of the source because of the person that reported it. Mike Coppinger has been wrong several times before in the past. And whenever he says sources say, it could be anybody. So we don't really know how reliable the source is. But let's talk about it as if it was hypothetically true. Because according to Coppinger, $20 million a fight was offered to Canelo Alvarez from the zone as a restructured deal, which originally would have paid him $35 million a fight. So that's not quite a 50% cut, but it's pretty damn near close to it. So, Jason here on Twitter, the PBC troll, was making claims that there were reports of almost a 50% cut. So I have to say, you were right according to the reports. So I'll give you that credit. That's what I do here. I questioned whether or not you made it up or not, but you didn't make it up because it was out there reported. So I will give you credit according to The Athletic, which is one source. You did read it. So I have to give you credit and actually retract my statement of calling you a liar and saying you made it up. So as a man, that's what I do here. If I'm wrong, I admit it. So I will give you that courtesy. But back to the story here. So I'm going to read the Yahoo Sports story. And again, they did reference The Athletic. So it says the zone wants Canelo Alvarez to stick around, but not at 35 million per fight. It says the streaming service reportedly offered Alvarez a reconstruction contract that would pay Alvarez 20 million guaranteed per fight, according to The Athletic. Then it goes on to say Alvarez is suing DAZN and Oscar De La Hoya for $280 million after DAZN did not want to approve another Alvarez fight against a lesser opponent. So it also goes on to say that the three entities met Tuesday to discuss the issue. The meeting reportedly lasted 10 hours and resulted in Alvarez being offered a reconstruction deal that would pay him $20 million per fight, according to The Athletic. So once again, I'm always going to be skeptical here when people come up with these numbers because this is a pretty confidential type situation when you're going over, the little fine details of a contract. And I'm not so sure, given my experience, because I've talked to promoters and managers and fighters, interviewed Bob Arum several times and asked him questions about reports about money, about contracts that have been reported. And several times he's saying, no, that's not true. That's a rumor. That's a rumor. That's a rumor. So why would someone be willing to volunteer this information to someone in the press when this is some pretty touchy stuff that's going on here? Now, could this be plausible? It could. It's not out of the realm of possibility that this story doesn't have some truth to it, but how much truth to it that it does have, again, I'm always going to be skeptical because there's only one source, and it's from a person who's been wrong in the past and who tends to jump the gun on things, which is Mike Coppinger from The Athletic. And all these other articles, as I said, are just referencing that article. So let's talk about this a little bit because more news that's been reported is this whole lawsuit stems from the fact that apparently, according to DAZN, they're saying that when they offered Canelo the $365 million for 11 fights at $35 million a fight, they were under the impression that they would be able to have the ability to approve or disapprove the opponent. So they can pick and choose the opponent. And I'm guessing from their standpoint, they're sitting there saying to themselves, if we're going to pay this guy a substantial amount of money per fight, then we have to have some say in what he, who he fights. We're not going to just pay him $35 million to fight Joe Blow. And when Canelo did fight Rocky Fielding, they only did pay him $15 million instead of the 35, because with all due respect to Rocky Fielding, he wasn't a premium opponent. He really wasn't. But when DAZN was negotiating this deal, apparently it seems as though Golden Boy was negotiating on Canelo's behalf. And they were the kind of the in between the fighter and the network. And as I said before, the fighter has the contract with the promoter and the promoter has the contract with the network. But the fighter has to commit to these multi-fight deals from the promoter on behalf of the broadcaster. So the claims are that from Canelo and from DAZN, both sides are saying that they were told two different things from Oscar De La Hoya of Golden Boy Promotions. So Canelo was under the impression that he would have the ability to pick and choose his opponents. He would have the right to, approve or refuse his opponents. And as I said, DAZN claims just the opposite, that no, we have the right to pick and choose who you fight. So apparently there's been some opponents that Canelo Alvarez had floated by DAZN, and they've rejected those opponents. Now everyone's in a tough situation now, according to the pandemic, and there's no live gate. The UFC has claimed to have lost $100 million, or they're projected to lose $100 million, according to Dana White, because there's no live gate. A lot of these big fights have been postponed, and Fury Wilder 3 is being held up because in order to pay these guys what they're worth for the fight, they have to set it up so there's going to be some sort of live gate for these guys. And Dana White has claimed that even with this pandemic, we're not cutting anyone's pay. Bob Arum has said even guys like Terrence Crawford and his premium fighters, they're going to at least get paid their minimum guarantees. So you have to ask yourself, who's right and who's wrong in this situation? And then we have to look at it from a legal standpoint. Now, obviously, I'm not a lawyer. Did take some business law classes in school. I do know a tiny bit about contract law. Been involved in some situations with contracts in my lifetime. And at the end of the day, when you do go to court, with a contract dispute, a lot of it boils down to how the judge or the mediator or the magistrate, whoever you're dealing with, how they're going to interpret the contract. And they can look at the contract and determine whether or not it's reasonable or not. Okay? Whether it's reasonable or not. There have been situations where some contracts have looked predatorial. They gave an unfair amount of leverage to one side, and a judge can determine that it's a predatorial contract. And I've brought this up before in other videos. And if it's too biased or it's too favorable leaning to one side, the judge can look at that and he can make a determination based off of that. Not all the time. will he uphold the contract based off of that? So if the contract is deemed like a situation where he feels one side's really being taken advantage of, then he can take a look at that. But in this case, you have to ask yourself who's in the right and who's in the wrong. At the end of the day, DAZN was under the impression, and they had, it seems as though they had a separate contract than the one that Golden Boy was, had given to Canelo. So it seems as though there's two contracts. One contract that Golden Boy gave to DAZN, and one contract that Golden Boy gave to Canelo. So the one party here that looks to me to be in a no-win situation is actually Golden Boy Promotions, because Canelo has an argument and DAZN has an argument. Okay, and if DAZN has to or decides that they're going to allow Canelo to have, a choice on who he fights, then apparently that it seems as though, according to this article, that's why he was ordered or offered, excuse me, not ordered, offered the 20 million instead of the 35 million. So if you want to be able to pick and choose your opponents, then we're going to have to restructure the pay. We're not going to just pay you 35 million to fight Joe Blow off the street. So if that's the situation, if that's how you want it to be moving forward, then we're going to have to adjust the pay. Okay? And if Canelo Alvarez agrees to that, then that's fine. But again, he has an argument because, according to the contract he has to Golden Boy, the contract he has with Golden Boy is totally different. It says that he's guaranteed the 35 million per fight, and he could fight pretty much whoever he wants. He has the ability to pick and choose. So how is a judge going to interpret this? And it seems as though when they first went to court, the judge was questioning, well, why are you suing both Golden Boy and DAZN when DAZN really shouldn't be the one sued here, because they didn't really violate anything. So I think the beef Canelo really has is with the promoter, because the promoter is the one that double talked here, that told DAZN one thing and had a contract with DAZN, or drew up some paperwork with DAZN, which was entirely different than the paperwork that they had with Canelo. So I think Canelo Alvarez has an issue with Golden Boy, and I think he has a real strong argument that, yeah, I was misled by Golden Boy, and they're not upholding the terms of their contract. So I believe, in my opinion, and again, it's just my opinion, that Canelo Alvarez has a strong argument in which he could get out of the contract with Golden Boy. And therefore, if he's out of that contract with Golden Boy, then essentially he doesn't have to fight on his own anymore. In my opinion, I think that the judge can interpret it that way, because again, I don't think Canelo Alvarez has a contract with DAZN, because usually, again, the way deals are structured, the fighter has to deal with the promoter, and the promoter has to deal with the broadcaster. So technically, if Canelo can get out of his contract with Golden Boy, then he wouldn't be fighting on DAZN anymore. So, and DAZN apparently was paying, according to reports, they were paying Oscar 40 million, and of that 40 million, Oscar and Golden Boy was giving Canelo Alvarez 35 of it. So again, the promoter is paying the fighter, but if they don't have the funds to pay the fighter, then that's going to be a big, huge problem for Golden Boy Promotions. So like I said, I think at the end of the day, it's up to Canelo Alvarez, really. The ball's in his court and what he wants to do. I mean, I think he has a strong enough argument to get out of the contract with Golden Boy, because I don't think they negotiated in good faith on his behalf with DAZN. Okay? So the issue is Golden Boy is going to be on the hook possibly for this $280 million. And how the judge interprets this, what the judge wants to do here, it's gonna be really, really interesting to see how this whole thing plays out. But again, I think at the end of the day, the biggest loser here is going to be Golden Boy Promotions, without a doubt, in my opinion. If Canelo Alvarez decides to walk away from this deal or try to walk away from this deal. Um, I know a lot of people saying, "Oh, well, how can you feel bad for a guy that's getting paid $35 million a fight?" But here's the thing. Here's the thing. You got to look at history. Now, Floyd Mayweather had that deal with Showtime, where he was getting a guarantee of $31 million a fight, and he got $31 million whether he fought Andre Berto, Robert Guerrero, or if he fought Manny Pacquiao or Conor McGregor. No matter, or Marcos Maidana, they had to pay him $31 million, and they never, pulled back on that, regardless of who the opponent was. Now, obviously, we're in a different situation with COVID. Everyone's losing money here, but not everyone is restructuring their pay scale. Like I said, Bob Arum's still paying Terrence Crawford his mandatory minimums, but Terrence Crawford was complaining that he was used to getting a little bit something extra on top of his minimum when he fought a bigger fight, or depending upon the event, he would get a bigger upside. But technically, if Canelo Alvarez was given a contract that told him he was going to get $35 million a fight, and it didn't specify that he couldn't choose his opponents, and he was assured by Golden Boy that he would have first and last say on who he fights, and he went in and he signed that contract with Golden Boy, and there's literature to prove that was the case. It could be documented that he has paperwork that can prove that was the case. Then Canelo Alvarez is not in the wrong here, in my opinion. And I would think a judge may look at that and say, possibly he's not in the wrong. I can't speak with 100% certainty, but that's the thing. But then a judge can look at the situation and say, well, DAZN has paperwork saying, yeah, we'll pay him $35 million a fight, but we have the right to pick and choose, or we have the right to approve or refuse the guy he fights. We're not going to just throw $35 million at him to fight anybody, which is fair. So again, not to beat a dead horse, but Golden Boy seems to be the one that really screwed up here. So you can't blame Alvarez, and you really can't blame DAZN. Really can't blame DAZN. And again, the only contract that I've ever seen where a fighter can just get guaranteed money regardless of who he fights was that Floyd Mayweather contract. Every other situation that I've seen, like when Andre Ward would or Chad Dawson or Andre Berto, when they fought on HBO and stuff, and I know Andre Ward had a situation where he would want to fight specific guys when he was an HBO fighter, and his promoter would propose these specific fights and ask HBO to broadcast them, and they would turn down a lot of his opponents. They would turn down a lot of his opponents, but for whatever reason, Andre Berto could fight whoever he wanted. Chad Dawson could fight whoever he wanted, and the fights got approved. So it's kind of funny how certain guys have leverage and certain guys don't, based upon the promoter that they're affiliated with. Chad Dawson and Andre Berto were Al Haymon fighters, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm not 100% sure if Chad Dawson was an Al Haymon fighter. I think he was at some point in time. I could be wrong there. If anyone can correct me, that's fine. But for whatever reason, Andre Berto, Chad Dawson, a lot of these PBC fighters don't have issues being put on Fox or Showtime or whatever. They don't have any issues. You don't hear too many complaints about the UFC fighters being not the UFC fighters, but the PBC fighters, the PBC fighters being told, no, we're not going to broadcast your fight. We don't like the opponent. And like I said, Floyd Mayweather, whether he fought on Andre Berto, Marcos Maidana, Robert Guerrero, no matter who he fought, he got that $31 million and he never complained. So we're not hearing, fighters complain too much. We heard we heard Terrence Crawford complain, but he was never told that his mandatory minimum was going to be taken away from him. He was complaining that, hey, if I'm in a big fight, I still want that extra revenue on top of that I was getting before this pandemic hit. So obviously, this pandemic is going to affect revenue, but it's going to be up to the fighters to either agree or not agree to accept restructured purses, changes in their purses. And it seems as though the top guys really haven't had to take a cut. And this is the only situation where we've seen a top guy have to take a substantial pay cut. Now, they're asking Canelo Alvarez to take, allegedly now, they're asking Canelo Alvarez to take almost a 50% pay cut here. That's crazy. That is crazy. So I can understand Canelo's argument here. Now, whether you agree that the $35 million a fight was excessive, hey, if he was offered that, he was offered that. That was the deal. That was the deal. And if Golden Boy deceived him or misrepresented him when they were talking to DAZN, then that's Golden Boy's fault. I honestly think that there's a strong case for Canelo Alvarez. They could literally bankrupt Golden Boy, possibly, if they really go hard here. You know? Troy says times are different. There's a pandemic and restrictions on live gates, so fighters, promoters, and managers can expect to take less money. Well, again, like I said, some promoters aren't paying guys less than they were getting before the pandemic. Bob Arum has been, has said he's going to pay Terrence Crawford his mandatory minimum. If you have a contract that says that you're supposed to get paid a specific amount of money per fight, pandemic or no pandemic, that person, that promoter has to pay that fighter that amount of money. Now they could apply for assistance from the government, like other companies have, and they could use that money to pay the fighters. From what I understand, Golden Boy got some of that money from the government, that government assistance money, the pandemic money from the government, and a lot of these other promotional companies, I'm assuming, took some of that money too. I'm not so sure if UFC took it, but again, the government has offered big, businesses, small businesses, big businesses, that money, that relief money, that pandemic relief money, in order to keep their companies afloat. So it's not like these promotional companies like Top Rank, Golden Boy, and PBC that over the years they haven't made a lot of money, that they haven't been in the black for a long period of time. So if they get this government assistance money, then they could use this money to pay the fighters. But if fighters have a contract, then I'm not so sure that, based on this situation with the pandemic, I'm not so sure that can be used as an excuse to not pay a fighter what you told him and you guaranteed him he was going to get paid. Just like all of a sudden, if you go buy a house or you go buy a car, and when you bought that house and when you bought that car, they did a credit check on you, and you could verify your employment. You could verify your yearly earnings, but then all of a sudden you lose your job through no fault of your own. Say, for instance, your company goes out of business or something, and you can't work, or you have to take a job making less money. Are they going to sit there and say, "Oh, okay, we'll restructure your mortgage payment. Well, until you get a better job, we'll allow you to pay only half of your mortgage." Now, you could renegotiate, or you could apply for a loan and try to get a different interest rate or whatever, or you can get a home equity loan or whatever. But at the end of the day, you're still going to have to pay back what you owe. No one's going to take anything off the top. At the end of the day, you're going to have to pay what you owe. You could take out a second mortgage or whatever you want to do, but at the end of the day, that gets added to what you owe on that house. You still have to pay it. So at the end of the day, a deal is an agreement is an agreement. A deal is what it is. You have to honor it. And especially if the government is offering these companies money and assistance, that money is supposed to go back to the employees, and in this case, the fighters. So I think the big problem here is the zone is claiming we're not just going to pay him any amount of money to fight anybody. We're not going to just throw that 35 million at him to fight anybody. We should have a say. And I agree. I mean, obviously, if I'm paying somebody money, I'm not just going to give them money if I'm not happy with the service. So if they're not happy with the opponents, they went into this deal, with the intention of Canelo giving them high quality money fights. And in fairness to them, ever since Canelo signed this deal, who did he fight? He fought Rocky Fielding, and he fought Danny Jacobs, and he fought Sergey Kovalev. Now, the Danny Jacobs fight was a good fight. Danny Jacobs not a real big name, but he had a chance to win the fight. I thought that the fight was very close and competitive, but Canelo Alvarez was favored in that fight. Sergey Kovalev, no one really gave him a shot, and he was stopped. And Rocky Fielding obviously was a real huge underdog, and no one gave him a chance. And obviously he got knocked out like we all thought he would. So if you look at these last three fights that Canelo has fought, you have to ask yourself, and from DAZN's viewpoint, are we really getting the bang for our buck that we anticipated? Have people been excited about these last three Canelo fights? Has Canelo been in a fight in recent years where anyone has said, geez, this guy could really lose here? And the answer I would suggest is no, he hasn't. He hasn't. And I think DAZN is looking at that. Maybe DAZN is having buyer's remorse here. Okay? They're having buyer's remorse here. So we don't know really when DAZN says we want him to fight premium opponents. We don't really know who they're considering a premium opponent. They're considering a premium opponent in terms of ability, or is it status? I'm sure it's probably a little bit of both. Do they feel as though a fight with Callum Smith or Billy Joe Saunders could really get people interested and have people say, "Damn, I want to get a subscription to DAZN now. I want to see Canelo. I really want to see those two fights." Is that going to really light a fire under people? Is that going to get people excited? Is that going to make people say, "Hey, you know what? I want to subscribe to DAZN now. Those are great fights." Would those be crossover fights? Would those be fights that would make people say, "Damn, I'm not going to miss that one"? Maybe, maybe not. Outside of people like myself and other hardcore boxing fans, I'm sure a lot of people in the United States do not know who Billy Joe Saunders is, and they don't know who Callum Smith is, because again, those are UK fighters. So I don't know what the expectation is or was from DAZN when they did sign Canelo Alvarez. When you look at the landscape of the middleweight division, it seems as though they really wanted to have that fight with Golovkin, Canelo and Golovkin. But at the end of the day, what was the plan after that? What other big money fights out there are there for Canelo Alvarez? Really? That's what you have to ask yourself. That's what you have to ask yourself. Sean, not gonna take the bait today. You're coming in here on the chat looking to start an argument, and I'm just letting you know it's not going to work today because I'm in a better place right now. I'm not going to stoop down to other people's levels. All I'm doing is giving you my opinion on the situation. And I'm telling you, DAZN does not want to pay Canelo Alvarez $35 million a fight if he's just going to fight any Joe Blow. And I think my statement is a fair statement. I'm not criticizing anybody here. I'm giving my opinion on the situation given the information that I have. That's all it is. I'm telling the truth. That's all I'm doing. But realistically speaking, outside of Gennady Golovkin, name me another big money fight that would have been out there for Canelo Alvarez. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. So if they were concerned about not wanting to pay Canelo Alvarez $35 million, and they only wanted to pay him that for premium opponents, okay, outside of the Gennady Golovkin fight, which generated a shitload of revenue, the first two fights, they did huge money. What other fight out there would have even come remotely close to that in terms of generating interest and revenue? So in fairness to Canelo, who else out there is there for him to fight that DAZN would be excited or they would be really happy about? What other fighter out there? Like Tyson Fury has that Joshua fight out there. What other huge money fight out there, big event type fight out there for Canelo Alvarez would there have been? So all in all, when you look at it, why would you lock a guy in there for 11 fights at $35 million a fight and then now say, oh, we're not going to just pay him $35 million to fight anybody? Okay, that's fair. But outside of Gennady Golovkin, who else out there would make a $35 million fight for Canelo Alvarez, in your opinion, DAZN? So at the end of the day, yeah, I do blame Golden Boy the most here, but then you have to look at DAZN. It's like, why did you lock him in for 11 fights? Why did you sign him to a $365 million deal? Because 11 fights, think about that. Fighters fight twice a year. So you basically signed this guy to a 5-year contract, not knowing what the landscape of the middleweight division or the super middleweight division or the light heavyweight division was going to be. And now you're sitting there complaining, oh, well, we only want to pay him $35 million for premium fights. There's not 11 premium fights out there, though, in fairness. Realistically speaking, is there 11 premium fights out there? I'm trying to give DAZN the benefit of the doubt here, and I do blame Golden Boy for double talking, and I don't think it's unfair for DAZN to want to have a say in who Canelo fights if they are paying him $35 million a fight, but they have to be a little bit realistic here. Now there's 9 fights left on this contract. So is there 9 premium fights left out there for Canelo Alvarez? There's only really one premium fight out there for Canelo Alvarez. Right? Think about it. That's Gennady Golovkin. Now you could look at Charlo, you could look at people like Callum Plant, you could look at David Benavidez, but those are PBC guys. They're not going to fight on the app. So DAZN really, I think, was a little bit unrealistic with their expectations as well, thinking that there was going to be 11 premium fights out there for Canelo Alvarez. So it was a stupid thing for them to do, in my opinion, to lock someone in there for 11 fights. And then they locked in Gennady Golovkin, who's not in his prime anymore, who's on the tail end of his career after he didn't look great against he looked like there was some slippage in the second Canelo fight. With all due respect, I still think he won the fight, but there was definitely some slippage there. And after that performance, they signed him to a 6-year deal, multi-million dollar thing, multi-million dollar contract as well. Like no one's doing that anymore. Like PBC, they don't sign fighters to long-term deals. Even Tyson Fury, his deal is not a long deal. It's not for 11 fights or for 6 fights. Okay? I think Tyson Fury's deal was for like 4 or 5 fights, if I'm not mistaken. I can go back and double check that, but it wasn't for 11 fights. Like that's ridiculous. Like that's crazy. Like when was the last time a fighter was signed to 11 fights? Like 5 years. Who knows what's going to happen in 5 years? To sit there and guarantee a guy $35 million. Now, you could sit there and say, well, why did Showtime do it with Floyd? Well, because there was a lot of that Pacquiao fight. Okay? That Pacquiao fight was supposed to heal all wounds. There was no way that if that Pacquiao fight happened, it wasn't going to generate an obscene amount of money. And they knew that no matter what happened, that fight was going to heal all wounds, regardless. That was going to make up any losses that they had suffered, from the previous 5 fights. So they had Manny Pacquiao. They had Canelo Alvarez, which were 2 monster fights. And then the Conor McGregor fight, which was outside the deal, but it was still some icing on the cake. Okay? And Floyd was already a proven pay-per-view star. People were buying his fights just to see him lose. He had his haters and his admirers buying those fights. So it was a different situation. But you have to question the zone's, decision making here. Why? Excuse me. Why did they make this deal for 11 fights? And at least with Floyd, there was a pay-per-view upside. So DAZN actually, in my opinion, made a bad deal. And it doesn't seem to be working out. And now they're complaining about it. And even if they do have the ability to pick and choose the opponents, and if they do have the ability to approve or refuse the opponents, once again, there's 9 fights left. There is not 9 premium opponents out there that you would say would be able to generate enough money to pay Canelo Alvarez $35 million. How many pay-per-view buys would Canelo Alvarez and Billy Joe Saunders do? How many pay-per-view buys would Canelo Alvarez and Callum Smith do? How many pay-per-view buys would Canelo Alvarez and Caleb Plant do? How many pay-per-view buys would Canelo Alvarez and David Benavidez do? Think about it. Would any of those fights crack 1 million pay-per-view buys? If Sergey Kovalev versus Canelo Alvarez was on pay-per-view, how many pay-per-view buys would it have done? Would any of those fights have cracked the $1 million, not the $1 million, the million pay-per-view buys that his fights did with Gennady Golovkin? Ask yourself those questions. So DAZN, I believe, screwed up here. It was a bad deal on their part. They overestimated how much subscribers that Canelo Alvarez would bring to the app. It just doesn't seem like enough people were excited enough about Canelo Alvarez to sign up for this app. It just really doesn't. I think they overestimated how this whole thing was going to play out. They overestimated how many subscribers they were going to be able to generate by signing Canelo Alvarez. Just didn't work out. So it was a bad decision on their part to lock Canelo Alvarez in for 11 fights, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. So now they made a bad deal, and they're having buyer's remorse about it now. They've already raised the price of their app to $20. Okay. In less than a year's time, a little over a year's time, or even less than a year's time, they raised their price. They doubled their price to $20. That's number one. Now they're looking to restructure a deal with Canelo Alvarez, allegedly, and take 50% of the amount that take 50% away of the amount they originally promised him. Let me ask you this question. Would any of you be happy about taking a 50% pay cut? That's the thing. That's the thing. Oh, Beeb, why are you hating on the zone? Beeb, why this, why that? And all these people that are saying that are people, the majority of them are people in the UK that can't even buy the zone, that don't even have the ability to access the zone. But yet they want to defend the zone because their hero, Eddie Hearn in Matchroom Boxing, is affiliated with the zone. So any criticism of the zone, oh, you're a hater, you're this, you're that. At the end of the day, it is what it is. I'm giving my opinion on a situation, and I have the right to do that. If you don't like my opinion, then you don't like my opinion, but don't discredit my opinion, because what I'm saying here, I believe I'm making good points. I believe my points are legitimate. Ask yourself this question: if you were DAZN, would you have signed a fighter and guaranteed him $35 million a fight for 11 fights? Would you give someone a 5-year contract for $365 million, not knowing who those opponents were going to be for the next 5 years? I don't think anyone in this chat or anyone watching this video can honestly agree that that was a good deal, that was a smart business decision. Would you invest in a company not knowing if you were going to get a return on your money? And I repeat, the only big money fight out there at this time, and possibly for a long time, is Gennady Golovkin. And based upon what happened in his last fight against Derevyanchenko, which I thought he clearly lost, he clearly got beat up. Now, even that fight may not generate the same interest it would have before the Derevyanchenko fight, because now people can sit there and say, well, why do I want to watch that fight? Golovkin's clearly past his prime. It's not the same fight anymore. There's always the possibility that that could happen too. So at the end of the day, yeah, Golden Boy double talked here. They're the ones that made promises to Canelo. They're the ones that made promises to DAZN. And apparently, it seems as though there were two different contracts, one that Golden Boy had with DAZN and one that Golden Boy had with Canelo. And each contract is different. So at the end of the day, Golden Boy is at fault here. But originally, when this deal was first done, even regardless whether or not DAZN had the authority to pick and choose, whether or not they had the rights to approve or disapprove, even with all that, to sit there and think that they were going to get a return on their money by paying a guy $35 million a fight when there's really not 11 $35 million fights out there, then that's their fault. You have to question them on what their expectations were. It's ridiculous. I challenge anyone to tell me, are there 11 fights out there for Canelo Alvarez, even if he was on pay-per-view, say Canelo Alvarez wasn't even on the zone and he was on pay-per-view. Are there 11 fights out there that you think would generate enough money for him, in order for him to get $35 million a fight? Realistically speaking, answer that question. Can anyone say that there are 11 fights out there that you can say, oh, all right, that's gonna warrant him getting $35 million a fight? Now, people criticize the Mayweather contracts. No, Suleiman, you can't say that, Suleiman. No, you can't. Come on, stop. So if Canelo Alvarez fights Billy Joe Saunders, okay, or if he fights Callum Smith, or if he fights David Benavidez, or if he fights Caleb Plant, even if he fights Better Biev, right? Or if he fights Bivol, okay? What, like, name 11 or name 9 fights that is going to generate $35 million a fight for him. None of those fights, if they were on pay-per-view, would crack 1 million pay-per-view buys. None of them. Be realistic about it. A Floyd Mayweather rematch now? Come on, bro. Stop. Let's just be real about it. It was a dumb deal. Let's be honest. Let's speak with this and not with this. Let's use this today and let's put this away. Let's put the heart away and let's use the brain today. That's what we're going to do. Canelo versus Khabib? Okay. I'll give you that. Canelo versus Conor? Okay, I'll give you that. But again, what is the likelihood of those fights being? Khabib would never fight him. Khabib has no interest in boxing. No interest in boxing. He would never do it. And again, do you enter a contract with the fighter, a boxer, with the intent of making fights with MMA fighters? Is that the goal? Nope, not even versus Spence. Well, okay. We saw what Spence and Mikey Garcia did. What'd that do? About almost 600,000 pay-per-view buys? Spence and Canelo? Put that in Texas? All right, now okay. That has potential. I like that. That has potential. Spence is a big name, in his area. But you'd need a live gate with that. You'd have to put that in a big stadium. You could put that in a Cowboy Stadium or something. You'd have to have a gate with that. Yeah. Okay, I'll give you that, JC. All right. But yeah, man, I mean, at the end of the day, he's got to be real about this, bro. Golden Boy did screw up here, but at the end of the day, the zone, it was a stupid deal. It was a real dumb deal. Now, if the reports are true too, and the zone's not willing to pay Canelo Alvarez the $35 million to fight Saunders, or they're not willing to pay him the $35 million to fight Callum Smith, then again, those are two very good opponents for him in terms of ability. But just because everyone doesn't know who those people are, but again, you had to look at this landscape. And realize what was out there for Alvarez. And outside of Golovkin, like I said, there are no boxers out there that could generate the amount of money to justify paying Canelo Alvarez $35 from a business standpoint. That's the thing. So yeah, Golden Boy lied to both sides, but the zone right from the jump made a stupid deal. You locked in a guy for 11 fights and promised him $35 million a fight. Promised him $35 million a fight. You promised him $35 million a fight, regardless of, not knowing what with knowing what the landscape of the division was. Screwed up. What did I say? $35 earlier? Obviously, you guys know I meant 35 million. Don't take shots, bro. Don't take shots. Don't start nitpicking here when you already know what I'm talking about. Yeah, they were banking on that Triple G fight, bro. They were definitely banking on that Triple G fight. All right, guys. I don't know what else I could say about this topic. I pretty much said it all. But let's end it on this. Yeah, Golden Boy was the real problem here. They made the biggest mistake. They're the party that should be most held at fault. But again, what did the zone think they were going to get? What did they think they were going to get, given the landscape of the middleweight division, given the landscape of the super middleweight division, and given the landscape of the light heavyweight division? What types of opponents did they expect? So it's their fault, even with the ability to choose the opponents. They were still going to be in a situation where it was going to be tough to justify paying this guy $35 million a fight and not end up losing money on the back end of it. Just the way it is. And then you can sit there and say, well, yeah, the company that owns the zone is the Perform Group. They're worth like $24 billion. Okay, it doesn't matter how much money someone has. Nobody's going to throw good money after bad. No one's going to just sit there and say, okay, yeah, all right, we have the amount of money to take the loss, so who cares? No one's gonna voluntarily just lose money just to lose money, just because they have the money to lose. No one wants to throw money away. So I don't think the Perform Group is going to be happy about losing money year after year after year. Okay? So let's just be honest about that. Doesn't matter how much money a company has. No one's going to be willing to lose money. No one's going to just throw money away. All right, guys. Thanks for joining in. Thanks for your opinions in the chat. It's always good chopping it up with you guys. I'm thinking about going live tonight to do a live cast for this Charlo pay-per-view. What do you guys think? You want me to go live tonight? Would you guys tune in if I went live tonight? Let me know. I think I'm leaning towards doing that and going live tonight. I'm really excited about this card tonight, so I'm thinking about going live tonight. I think there's going to be a big upset. I think Derevyanchenko is going to beat Jamal Charlo. I'm expecting Charlo to get actually knocked out tonight late. That's a bold pick. But I'm expecting him to get knocked out late. I'm going for Chenko with the upset. But I think everyone else, I think Jamel should beat Rosario. I don't think there's going to be any other surprises on the card. I think the big upset tonight is going to be Derevyanchenko. Suleiman says Derevyanchenko's a punching bag. He didn't look like a punching bag against Jacobs. Didn't look like a punching bag against Golovkin. I thought he won both fights. So we'll see. All right, guys. Thank you. Talk to you all soon. Have a great day, man. Peace out.